and welcome to today's word study video. I appreciate you guys being here and watching me. Today is going to be a long one. So we're going to talk about Mark chapter 16, and I believe it's first verse 9. So let's just, so I don't take up too much of your time, let's get right into it here. Let me start off very quickly by giving you my contact information. Like I said, this is going to be a long one today. And as each of my teaching videos show, I use a lot of scripture because scripture is the foundation. It is the bedrock of our faith. And so I use a lot of scripture, and today is certainly no exception. So if anybody wants transcripts of my notes, I will be happy to email a PDF copy of these notes to you in your email box. Just contact me at allbelieversneedtorah@protonmail.com and request the notes for the teaching. You just got to give me an idea of what teaching you're talking about. I've got close to 100 of them now. So just let me know what teaching you want my notes to, and I will be happy to send a PDF copy to you. And if you want to get on the mailing list for the weekly Torah portions that I send out and participate in every week, you can go to the same email address, of course, and request to get on the mailing list for the Torah portions. Okay, if you watch me on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, there's no fellowship over there. Okay, and I'm trying to build a fellowship page on Facebook. I've got 2 pages over there that I'm trying to develop a fellowship on. The first one is called All Believers Need Torah. I've got 35,000 members there, but it's a private page. So anything, if you join that page, you're more than welcome to. There's people every day joining, but if you join that page, the thing is because it's a private page, anything you see on there that you may want to share, there's no share button available because it's a private page. So I made a duplicate page as far as content. I made a duplicate page, and it is Christians Today Need Torah. That's a public page, and I recommend you join this one because we have the share button available there, where if you join that page, and as of today, we've got, 18,000 members. You join that page, Christians Today Need Torah, being that it's a public page. If you see something that you want to share with your family members or friends, then the share button is available on that page. So that's why I recommend it. Okay, my YouTube channel. Some folks don't care for Facebook. That's fine. But I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/@ChristiansTodayNeedTorah/videos. I've got all my videos there. I'm thinking about getting a website, getting a blog on a website, on my own website. But I don't know, man. I'm at a disadvantage because I really don't know this technology. I watch some old guys here in the Philippines. They have their own YouTube channels, and these are old guys, man, my age. And man, I look at the production quality of their videos, and I'm thinking, How in the world do they do that, man? I can't. I excuse me. I struggle at this technology, and so thinking about getting a my own blog on the website. Uh, I'm thinking, man, that would be great if I knew how to, do it, but I don't, and plus I've got a plate full between my Facebook groups and YouTube and putting these word studies together. Uh, I've got my hands full right now, but I am very interested in getting my own blog on and a website because I could just store all my stuff there. I've got all my videos stored on YouTube and Facebook. Uh, but if for some reason they ever shut down or go away, then everything I've done is well, I've got it on a stick here, so I've still got them. But it's like years of wasted effort if YouTube or Facebook goes down for whatever reason. But if I had a website where I had everything on my website, then the chances of them being preserved there, uh, you know, is better. So anyway, I'm thinking about it, but I don't know, man. Okay, so that's my YouTube channel right there. I've got all my videos there. Right now we have 60 subscribers. Uh, and that's where I started off with my Facebook group, All Believers Need Torah. I started off with one member, my wife, and now we're up to 35,000 members. So yeah, I have 60 subscribers on YouTube, but that's okay because this the path we're on is not the wall, is not the wide and broad path. Okay, we are on the narrow path. Okay, so having 60 subscribers does not bother me at all because we are on the narrow path, and what we talk about uh you know is not of any interest to the vast majority of humans. Uh, so yeah, I would like to have more than 60, but you know what? That's fine. You know, uh, that's fine right where it's at. And if it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm okay either way. Okay, recommended Bible version. I've got mine here. I've got it buried right now. But it's here with it's I can reach out to it and grab it, but I've got all kinds of books and notebooks and stuff on top of it. But anyway, my recommended Bible version is found right there, isr-messianic.org. My recommended Bible programs that I have on my laptop right here, and I depend on every day that I'm working on my word studies, uh, is esword.net, e-sword.net, and then the word.net. Both of those are free, by the way. Up here, you get this recommended uh, hard copy Bible right here. I've had mine for 12 years. Uh, it's uh, it's a great version, Bible version. I love it. But 12 years ago, I paid $19.95 for mine, and I don't know what the prices are nowadays, but you can go to that website, isr-messianic.org, and you can click around their websites and find out the different choices they give you, the different prices, and I think that you will be very happy if you got your own copy of the 2009 edition of the Scriptures. Okay, now, like I mentioned in the last video, not only do I read the Torah portion every Sabbath, like thousands and thousands and thousands of other uh, believers in Messiah Yeshua, but I also add to that Grandpa Gene's Bible reading plan. Now, Grandpa Gene's Bible reading plan is not for the faint of heart, okay? It is for the serious Bible reader. And in this plan, we go through 49 chapters every week, 7 chapters per day, 7 days a week. That's 49 chapters per week, every week. Okay. Now, when you participate in the Grandpa Gene's Bible reading plan, we go through the complete Bible from Genesis 1:1 to Revelation, what is it? I forget it's 21:21 or 20:21 or 22:21 or something like that. But anyway, we go from the first verse to the last verse of our Bibles 2 times a year. Okay, so it's a serious reading plan. And the technique that I have employed for myself is I go to youtube.com/at Scorby U Bible. Scorby U Bible. This is Alexander Scorby, and he is known for his voice for reading through the entire King James Bible. He's got a voice like, I don't know, for you older folks like me, you may remember Paul Harvey. Now he had a voice that people really gravitated to. Well, the same for me anyway, for Alexander Scorby. He's got a great voice. And so for me to get through my 49 chapters per week, I go to YouTube and I go to Alexander Scorby's YouTube channel, which is at Scorby U Bible. And then I can follow along. He's reading the Bible in my ears, plus the King James text is up on my laptop screen. So that's how I knock out my let me see, 49 chapters a week. That's how I knock them out with Alexander Scorby reading the chapters in my ears, in my headphones here, and then I follow along with the text. So that's what I highly recommend you guys if you want to participate in Grandpa Gene's reading plan. Okay, and I have that available. Like I said, if you guys want to text me, not text me, but email me at allbelieversneedtorah at protonmail.com and request you request wherever you want. Request the hot link if you want me to send you a hot link to Alexander Scorby, his YouTube channel. If you want me to send you Grandpa Gene's reading list or reading plan, I can send you that. Okay. I can send you the notes to the word study we're going to do today, and you can get on the mailing list for the weekly Torah portions. So anyway, that's how I like to start out every day. Okay. I say I like to because I don't every day. I have a life here, and sometimes I just neglect to do it. But generally speaking, I like to start off every day by reading some scripture. Once I get some scripture reading done, uh, then I will go about my day. So that's a great way to start your day. And like I said, I don't do it every day, but I wish I could, and I try to. But like I said, life sometimes gets in the way, and we've got to leave in the morning to go do an errand or something that needs to be done, and I don't get to start off that particular day with any Bible reading. Uh, so anyway, let's get to the teaching for today. Let's stop this screen share here and see if I can get uh, the right screen share going here. Let me minimize this. I guess that's my problem. I need to minimize that and then start off with our word study, which is right here. Okay. So the title for today's word study is What a Difference a Comma Makes. Okay, what a difference a comma makes. The placement of a comma will change the meaning of the whole verse. And I'm going to show you that today. The passage of Mark 6:19, that's the passage we're going to concentrate on today. The passage of Mark 6:19 in all the mainstream Bible versions today appears to be saying that our Messiah rose from the grave on Sunday morning. Okay, this is what we who grew up in lawless Christianity, I grew up in the United Pentecostal Church, and it was just as lawless as any other church. But we were taught that Mark 16:9 was evidence that the Messiah rose up from the grave on Sunday morning. But as it turns out, this is just another one of those ancient man-made fabricated myths. Lawless churchianity has taken this passage of Mark 16:9 and they have combined it with the King James only passage of Acts 12:4, where the correct word Passover in Acts 12:4, the correct word Passover in the King James only Bible version was intentionally removed, and the ancient Babylonian goddess of fertility and sex was inserted into its place. So the King in Acts chapter 12:4, the King James Version, the translators, which when you research the history of the compiling of the King James Bible, you'll find out that it was 54 bishops from the Church of England that compiled the King James Version at the behest, at the command of King James, because King James didn't like the previously published Geneva Bible, which is, as far as Bibles go back then, it's a good Bible. But King James didn't like it, so he wanted to replace it. So the bishops of the Church of England, when it came to Acts chapter 12 and verse 4, where the Geneva Bible had Passover, the bishops of the Church of England removed the word Passover because King James didn't want it in there. King James wanted the word Easter put in its place. So that's why the King James is the only Bible that I know of, and I've looked at the 20 of them here on my laptop that I have available. And it's the only version that took out the word Passover in Acts 12:4 and inserted into it the name of the ancient Babylonian goddess of fertility and sex. And so lawless Christians, they take that passage in Acts 12:4 in the King James only Bible version, and then they combine it with Mark 16:9, and lo and behold, they create their own religion with the celebration of this ancient Babylonian sex goddess, bringing it in and claiming that they're doing that to celebrate the resurrection of the Messiah based on Mark 16:9. Well, it's all a bunch of hooey. It's all a bunch of fabricated lies. Okay, and we're going to get into that today. These two passages, Mark 16:9 and Acts 12:4, these two passages, they, talking about the lawless Christianity, have taken and have fabricated their own belief system that has no foundation in Scripture. Okay, so for those of us on the narrow path that are searching for truth, because like the prophets say, we've all inherited a bunch of lies. We've all inherited lies. And so once we realize that we have been lied to by lawless Christianity, and then we come out of lawless Christianity, because what fellowship has light with darkness? None. So we come out of that darkness of lawless Christianity, and then we start searching for truth. We start searching for truth that is contained in our scriptures. Okay, so our first step in learning the truth concerning Mark 16:9 is to understand that punctuation points does not exist in the Greek language. Okay, there are no commas, there are no periods, there's no punctuation marks at all in the Greek language. So this means that the placement of the commas, the periods, and all the other punctuation points was at the discretion of the translators, depending on how they wanted a particular verse to read. In the case of Mark 16:9 verse, there was a deliberate and intentional mispunctuation that took place because they wanted that verse to read a certain way. Okay, now that's a strong statement, but the reason I say that is because the translators of the King James Bible, they had a copy, or probably multiple copies, of the Geneva Bible. And I'm going to show you the difference between Mark 16:9 in the King James Bible and how it was rendered previously in the Geneva Bible. Okay, so the translators of the King James Bible, they deliberately and intentionally mispunctuated Mark 16:9 with a comma. And that changed the whole meaning of that verse. Okay, you can see for yourselves below that there are no punctuation points in the Greek. Okay, there's the Greek right there. And you'll notice that there is no commas. There's no periods. There's nothing. There is simply the Koine Greek. Okay, Now let's look at the three mainstream Bible versions where we see the mispunctuation. Okay, and I'm going to show you why I say that this is a mispunctuation. Okay, King James Version. Now, when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, comma, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. Okay, with the comma right there after the word week, that limits the day in which Yeshua rose from the grave to Sunday, the first day of the week. Okay. The American Standard Version follows suit. They put the comma right after week, but they don't even have enough respect for the Messiah to capitalize the word he. That's a pet peeve of mine. Okay. So when he had risen early on the first day of the week, comma, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. It's actually Mary of Magdal, because that was the town she was from, Magdal. Okay. The English Standard Version follows suit with the King James Version. They put the comma after the week. Now let's look at the Geneva Bible, which was published earlier than the King James Version. The Geneva was published in Switzerland in 1587, whereas the King James was published in England at 1611. So what, we're talking about 24 years previously, the Geneva Bible was published and widely available. And look at the comma that the Geneva Bible has. And when Yeshua was risen again, comma, early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. Okay. So the Geneva Bible, prior to the publication of the King James Bible, they had the comma in the correct place. Okay. The next Bible version is called a faithful version, and you will notice that it does not follow the King James Version example of where they put the comma, but a faithful version follows the example of the earlier published Geneva Bible. And this is how a faithful version renders this verse, and it renders it pretty accurately. Okay, now after Jesus had risen, comma, early the first day of the weeks, notice the plural usage of that word. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Now that Yeshua had risen, early the first day of the weeks, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. Okay, so they have the comma in the correct place. If you have to use a comma, they have it in the correct place. Okay, with the placement of the comma shown above in the AFW, all faithful or a faithful version, with the placement of the comma shown above, the time frame window of our Messiah's resurrection can be expanded to include the previous day, which was the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath. The placement of the comma, as we see in the Geneva Bible and in the A Faithful Version Bible, is the correct punctuation. Okay, so they put the comma in the correct spot. Okay, the Geneva, they have an interesting word here. And when Yeshua was risen again, I don't know why they felt the need to put the word again, because it could have just read, and when Yeshua had risen, comma, early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. Okay, but I don't know why they put that word there, but you just got to go with what you're given. Okay. Okay, moving on from the comma placement. So we're moving on now. Let's get into the really fun part, okay? Reading the passage again, we will focus this time on the highlighted part. Since we know that the word day is not in the original Greek, and I think I'm going to show you that. Well, yeah, here's the Greek again. Okay. The word day is not in there. Okay. Let's see. Where am I at? I lost my place. Since we know that the word day is not in the original Greek, and it's not, folks, I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you that the word day is not in the original Greek. Since we know that the word day is not in the original Greek for this particular verse, let's remove it and see how the verse reads. Yeah. Okay, now why do I say that the word day is not in the original? Because of the King James, they have it in italics. That's why. Do you see that right here? They have it in italics. Okay, that means they don't have the word they have the word Jesus in italics too, but you know what? That's okay, because this verse is talking about the Messiah. But the King James Version lets us know, because they have italicized the word day, that it is not in the original Greek. That's why I said that down here. Okay, since we know that the word day is not in the original Greek, because the King James Version has that word in italics, let's remove it and see how the verse reads. Now, after Yeshua had risen, early the first of the weeks, he appeared to Mary Magdalene, from whom he cast out 7 devils. Okay, first of the weeks. Okay, so what is this first of the weeks business all about? Most of our mainstream Bibles will have the word week or weeks, singular versus plural. But this is inaccurate, because there is no Greek words for the English word weeks or week available for that particular verse. Let me show you how the modern King James Version renders this Mark 16:9 passage. Okay, so this is in the modern King James Version. Mark 16:9, this is a 1962 edition of the modern King James Version. And when Yeshua had risen early the first of the Sabbath. Okay, I didn't use the word day, because day is not in the Greek. So when Yeshua had risen early the first of the Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast 7 demons. Okay, they got close. The modern King James Version got close. But let's tweak it a little by taking out the word day, which is not in the original Greek for this particular verse. Now, when Yeshua had risen early, the first of the Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast 7 demons. Okay, now considering the context of the verse, the all faithful version was getting closer to the truth when they used the plural word weeks instead of the singular word week. If we combine this with the modern King James version usage of the word Sabbath, we can correctly ascertain, again, based on the context of what the plural usage is actually referring to, that the word should be Sabbaths, plural. Okay, so let's read the verse one more time as it should actually be rendered. And when Yeshua had risen early, the first of the Sabbaths, comma, he appeared first to Mary of Magdal, the town she was from, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. Now, why is the word Sabbath the correct word instead of week? Okay, so we're going back to the mainstream Bible versions that will use the word week or weeks. So my question is, why is this word Sabbath the correct word instead of week? Okay, we're going back to the Greek. You see this word that I have highlighted here? That is in the space where the English Bible versions has inserted week or weeks. That is the word that is in the Greek. So what is this word that is in the Greek? The word that I highlighted is the Greek word that we get Sabbath from. The word that I have highlighted right here in the yellow in the Greek is the Greek word that we get Sabbath from. Let's look at this verse in the King James Version with the Strong's numbers. And I will show you right here. The word week, this is Mark 16:9. The word week is G451 according to the Strong's Concordance. So what is the definition of this Greek word 4521, which is highlighted right here? If you can see that, let me bring it down here and make sure you can see it. The highlighted word right here in the Greek is in the space right here where the King James Version and all the other modern mainstream Bible versions has the word week. So what is the Greek word 4521? Right there. Okay. So that is the definition. There's the Greek that I showed you up here. That's the Greek word right here. Okay. That's it right there. 4521, 4521. Definition right there. Okay. Okay, let me show you an interesting verse that provides further evidence. Okay. Here's the King James Version with the Strong's numbers, Matthew 28:1. Okay, in the end of the Sabbath, G 4521, as it began to dawn toward the first of the week. Okay, 4521. Okay, same Greek word, which is Sabbath, but the King James translators and probably all the other modern mainstream Bible versions, they took out Sabbath right here and they put in the word week. Same Greek word, 4521. 4521 right there. Okay. So that was an interesting verse that I found where they have Sabbath 4521 and week 4521 in the same verse. Okay, so the evidence is in and it is clear. The English word week was used as a substitute to replace the word Sabbath. Okay, in Mark 16:9 and Matthew 28:1. But why is this particular verse of Mark 16:9? But why in this particular verse of Mark 16:9 should the plural form of the word Sabbath be used? Okay, because of the context of what the plural use of Sabbaths. Okay, because of the context of what the plural use of Sabbaths is referring to. Okay, we are now going to get off into some pretty tall grass. Okay, I'm warning you right now. We are now going to get off into some pretty tall grass here. But bear with me and hang in there because this is something that is not commonly taught from Christian pulpits today due to the fact that it is concerning the feast of the Lord that are in the Torah. Let's read some scripture from the Torah first before we get off into this tall grass, and then I will try to unpack it into something that is easier to understand for someone who is learning this information for the first time, perhaps. Okay, there may be someone watching this video out of curiosity and they don't know anything about the information that I'm fixing to talk about. Remember, every single one of us older hands, I've been walking this walk for 12 years. There's been folks walking this walk for 20 years. Remember, every one of us older hands at this walk, this biblical walk of faith and obedience, we all learn this information for the first time ourselves at one time. Okay, now let me back up just a little bit. Why did I highlight Feast of the Lord? Well, because this is what the Torah says they are. I know in the book of John, it says the Feast of the Jews, the Feast of the Jews. I don't know how many times the book of John says the feast of the Jews, but the Torah says that they are the feast of Yahweh, the feast of Yah. The King James has it rendered the feast of the Lord. It's not the feast of the Jews. It's the feast of Yah, the feast of the Father. And you can write those down. Leviticus 23:2, 23:4, 23:37, and 23:44. In your King James Bible, it will have the feast of the Lord. Okay, so that's another misconception, that these are the feast of the Jews. They're not the feast of the Jews. They're the feast of Yah. Okay, let's read some scripture. Okay, so I've already said that. Leviticus 23:15. Okay, so now we're going to get off into the tall grass here. And we're going to find out why the usage of the word Sabbath is actually correct. Okay. Leviticus 23:15, New King James Version. This is the Father talking. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, so that would be the first day of the week, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Okay, so that's why the word Sabbath, plural, is the correct usage. The first of the Sabbaths is the correct usage that I showed you back here in somewhere back up in here. The first of the weeks, it actually should be first of the Sabbaths. Okay, first of the Sabbaths. Okay. Yeah, here it is right here. This is the corrected rendering. And when Yeshua had risen early, the first of the Sabbaths. Okay, so what is this first of the Sabbaths all about? Okay. 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. You shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath. So from the day after the Sabbath is the first day of the week. We are to count 7 Sabbaths. Okay, verse 16. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. So after the 7th Sabbath, which the count starts the day after the Sabbath, and we're going to get to what Sabbath we're talking about here. When we count 7 Sabbaths, that's 49 days. And then the day after the 49th, the 7th Sabbath, the day after that is the 50th day. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a grain offering to Yahweh. Okay. Moshe then repeats this ordinance decades later, because between here and Deuteronomy, the children of Israel, because of their disobedience, they walked around the mountain range of Arayat for 4 decades until everybody, except for Joshua and Caleb, everybody else had died off of that generation. Okay. And Moses, and of course Aaron and I don't know exactly. Well, I don't want to get off on that rabbit trail, but anyway, most of the people died. Most of that generation died. Okay. So Moses then repeats this ordinance. I think I'd be okay with putting 4 decades later to a new generation before they crossed over the Jordan into the promised land. So this is Moshe. He's repeating what the Father said to the people up here in Leviticus. Moshe is repeating it 4 decades later. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count the 7 weeks. So the 7 Sabbaths from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Next verse. Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks is also called the Feast of Shavuot. One day. It's a 1-day feast. The 1-day Feast of Weeks, the 1-day Feast of Shavuot, and the 1-day Feast of Pentecost. To Yah, your Elohim, with the tribute of a free will offering from your hand, which you shall give as Yah, your Elohim, blesses you. Okay, side note. I included the verse below because it shows that Gentiles who had chosen to be grafted in among Israel were also authorized to take part in this ordinance. Okay? So that's why I included this verse right here. You shall rejoice before Yah your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, the stranger, that's I believe it's H 1616, which is stranger, alien, sojourner, foreigner. It all means a Gentile. Okay, the Gentile and the fatherless and the widow who are among you at the place where Yah, your Elohim, chooses to make his name abide. Okay, so the only reason I included this verse was that the Gentiles who had chosen to be assimilated among the children of Israel were authorized to participate in this ordinance. Okay, where Yah your Elohim chooses to make his name abide. What is that talking about? Well, there's 2 places where the tabernacle was placed for an extended period of time. First, it was in Shiloh, and it was there for a little over 400 years. And then Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem. And then the Father placed his name in Jerusalem, and he abode in Jerusalem in the what we call the Holy of Holies. Okay, first it was in Shiloh, I think 425 years. Then it was in Jerusalem. And when the Ark of the Covenant was transferred, well, I mean, we can read the story. It's a wonderful story where King David transferred eventually, he got around to it, transferred the Ark to Jerusalem. Okay. Uh, and there's a wonderful story there. The ark, the father commanded that the ark be carried on the shoulders of the priest, or of the Levites, I should say, with these long poles. They were to carry them on their shoulders. Well, David didn't do that. Okay, he had the ark put into a wagon, and then the wagon, the wagon wheel went off into a rut or a pothole or something, and the ark got jostled, and somebody put out their hand to steady the ark to keep it from falling out of the wagon, and God smote him. Elohim smote him, killed him. Okay, probably with a bolt of lightning. Okay, it says fire, but the same with the two sons of Aaron when they offered strange fire. Okay, the father killed them instantly. They were dead before they hit the ground. It was lightning. It was bolts of lightning that killed the two sons of Aaron, and it was a bolt of lightning that killed that poor guy that was trying to steady the ark. A bolt of lightning killed him. Okay. Now, verse 10 says, okay, verse 10 of where we at now? I've done, okay, back here in Deuteronomy 16:10. And you shall keep the Feast of Weeks, also known as Shavuot, also known in the Christian world as Pentecost. Now, verse 10 says the Feast of Weeks, which is accurate because they've been counting the weeks since the weekly Sabbath contained within the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread. This feast is also known as the Feast of Shavuot, and we know it in the Christian world as the day of Pentecost because it's a one-day feast, but it's the Feast of Weeks because they have been counting the weeks since the day after the Sabbath that is contained within the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread. The feast is also called the Feast of Shavuot or the Day of Pentecost, and this is based on the definition of the word weeks. Okay, so weeks, H7620, H7620. Now look at the definition, the Hebrew definition of the word weeks. Okay. Shabua. 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 We have Shavuot. We have Shabua. Okay. So I think that the Feast of Shavuot is based on the definition of the word weeks. Shabua. Definition. Period of 7 days or years. Okay. Period of 7 days, week, Feast of Weeks. Okay. In the Christian world, we knew this as the day of Pentecost. Okay, it's a one-day feast, but it's the Feast of Weeks. It's the Feast of Shavuot. And I think Shavuot is based on the definition of the Hebrew word for weeks, Shabua. Okay, moving on from there. Okay, in the Christian world, we knew this as the day of Pentecost because of the definition of the word 50. Okay, here's the Greek word of the day, or the word 50. This is the Greek word right here. This is the English transliteration of that Greek word for 50. It is Pentecosta. Pentecosta. Okay, so that's why we call it Pentecost. It's the definition of the word 50. Okay, because we count 7 Sabbaths, and then the next day is the 50th day. Pentecosta. Pentecosta. Okay. Pentecost. 50. Okay, let me try and break down. Let me try and break this down. Okay, I've got that all jacked up. Let me try and break down the events that led up to the one-day Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, Pentecost. At the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Passover, that's the sacrifice of the lamb. That's all that is. Okay. Of course, Messiah was crucified on the Passover. He died on the Passover. He was crucified and he died on the Passover. He's he is the Lamb of Elohim, and he was sacrificed on the Passover. But the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts at the Passover meal. The Feast of Unleavened Bread starts. The first day of unleavened bread was a high Sabbath. Okay, some Bible versions will have high day or holy convocation, but it is a high Sabbath. Okay, at the Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day of unleavened bread was a high Sabbath. Still is. The first day of unleavened bread is a high Sabbath. Okay. Now, there's not a whole lot that we as Gentiles, not living in Jerusalem, not having a temple, not having the Levitical priesthood available to us, we cannot keep the Passover. But what we can do is we can celebrate the Passover. We can celebrate the remembrance of what the Passover was all about. But we can't keep Passover. Okay, but we can keep the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, you get all the yeast out of your homes for 7 days. Okay, you don't have any yeast in the homes. You don't have any raised loaf bread. In the Greek, that's artos. That's a Greek 740, artos. That's a raised loaf. We don't have any of that in our homes. We don't have any yeast. We don't have any donuts. We don't have any of that cake. We don't have any of that stuff in our home for 7 days. And during the 7 days, we eat with our meals unleavened bread. Now, I'm here in the Philippines. You know, when I lived back in the States, of course, I would go to the Safeway or King Soopers, and I would buy matzah, okay, from Israel. It would be in the kosher aisles. Well, we don't have kosher aisles here in the Philippines. So my choices are limited. What I do is my wife, she will buy me taco shells. Okay. Or flatbread. Some folks say flatbread is not kosher. But you know, I'll do taco shells for the week. Maybe I even do flatbread. I don't know. But the point is, it's not a raised loaf. That's what artos is in the Greek. That's Greek 740 artos, a raised loaf. Okay. We don't eat raised loaves of bread during the week of unleavened bread. We eat unleavened bread. Okay. At the Passover feast of unleavened bread, the first day of unleavened bread is a high Sabbath. These are the feast of the Lord, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their appointed times. When is the appointed time? We're fixing to find out right here. On the 14th of the first month, or the first new moon. Okay. They didn't have calendars back then. I've got a paper calendar downstairs. They didn't have paper calendars back then. They went by the moon. So on the 14th of the first moon of the year at twilight is, according to the New King James, is the Lord's Passover. Okay. Is the Lord's Passover. So on the 14th day of the first month, on the 14th of the first new moon, the first new moon, the first moon of the year, at twilight. When is twilight? Twilight is between sunset, when the sun, and I'm looking west right now, when the sun goes below the horizon, but we still have light, that's twilight. Okay, the sun sets, okay? The day comes to an end when the sun sets, but we still have light. That's twilight. So that period of time between the time that the sun goes below the horizon and total darkness, that's twilight. Okay, Leviticus 23:6. On the 14th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord, according to the New King James Version. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Okay, so the feast of unleavened bread, we have the Passover sacrifice and unleavened bread. Okay, we have on the 14th. Okay, so the 14th at twilight, that's when they would eat the Passover. Okay. And then on the 15th would start the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. This stuff, believe me, folks, this stuff confuses me too. Because when I'm doing these studies, a lot of the times, man, I am learning right along with you. So on the 14th day of the first month, okay, the how they calculated the first month was after the barley was determined to be ripe. The next new moon, or the first sliver of the new moon, after it was confirmed that the barley was ripe, that was the beginning of years. So on the 14th day of the first month, so the barley has been determined to be ripe. It's ready to be harvested. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight, between sunset and total darkness, was when the Passover lamb was eaten. Okay, on the 15th day of the same month, the very next day, then we start the 7-day feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. That's what we can celebrate. That's what we Gentiles, former Gentiles, according to Paul, that's what we can do. We can celebrate the Passover. We don't need to kill a lamb because you can only do that in Jerusalem. But you can roast, go to the store, get you some meat or whatever. You can get lamb if you want at the store. You don't kill no lambs, okay? Because that can only be done in Jerusalem. And it can only be done by the Levite at the temple. So forget about this business. I know there's a lot of people out there that they think they are doing right by killing a lamb, but we're not to kill the lamb unless we are in Jerusalem with the temple, with the priest. We don't have any of that. But we can celebrate the Passover. We can go to the store or find you a vendor here that has lamb. Get you a lamb and roast it in the oven and celebrate the Passover that way with the other ingredients, bitter herb and whatever else was in the what is commonly called today the Seder. But there's 3 ingredients: lamb, bitter herbs. I forget the other one, but anyway. Okay, Greg, you're getting off track here, buddy. Okay, 23:7. On the first day, you shall have a holy convocation. The first day of what? The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We have a high Sabbath. So we had the Passover. We had Yeshua was killed, was executed. He was the Lamb of Elohim. And then we have the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. Okay, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a high Sabbath. The last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a high Sabbath. Somewhere in the middle, we will have a weekly Sabbath. The day after that weekly Sabbath, somewhere between the high Sabbath at the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread and at the end, the high Sabbath marking the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, somewhere in there is the weekly Sabbath. The day after the weekly Sabbath was when we were to count 7 following Sabbaths, and then the next day would be the 50th day. Okay, I hope I'm making that clear to you. Okay. On the first day, you shall have the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a high Sabbath. You shall do no customary work on it. What does that mean? Well, you're not to do your normal everyday occupational job. You can cook. I think you can cook, but you're just not to do your customary work. The last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is also a high Sabbath. It's high day. Verse 8, Leviticus 23:8. But you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yah for 7 days. So during the Feast of Unleavened Bread in Jerusalem, at the temple, with the Levitical priesthood, they were offer an offering made by fire to Yah for 7 days. The seventh day of the feast of unleavened bread shall be a holy convocation, a high Sabbath. You shall do no customary work in it. Okay, in between these two high Sabbaths, we got the week of unleavened bread right here. In between the two high Sabbaths, first day, last day, in between those somewhere would be a weekly Sabbath. Okay, in between these two high Sabbaths that mark the start and the end of the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread was the regular weekly Sabbath. At twilight, between sunset and total darkness, at the closing of this particular weekly Sabbath, somewhere inside the week of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first fruits of the barley grain was harvested. Okay, remember the first month on the Hebrew calendar started with the first sliver of the new moon after it was determined that the barley was ripe and ready to be harvested. The first fruits of the barley grain was harvested. Okay, at twilight, between sunset and total darkness, at the closing of this particular weekly Sabbath, the first fruits of the barley grain was harvested. So the closing of the weekly Sabbath had come to a close. So they can start harvesting. During the entire night, the majority of this grain was harvested. Well, all the grain was harvested, but the majority of the grain that was harvested was roasted and ground up in order to prepare it for the first fruits offering made by fire to the Father in the morning. Okay. That would have been the first day of the week. Stalks of barley grain that was not roasted was presented as a wave offering before the Father. Leviticus 23, 10, and 11. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you, okay, Israel was given to the children of Israel by the Father. It's his land. It doesn't belong to the Palestinians, which is a fabricated race of people to begin with, but that's another story. That land is the Father's land, and he gave it to the children of Israel. Okay. Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give to you. Okay, the Father gave that land to Israel and no one else. And reap its harvest, you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. This is the barley harvest. He shall wave the sheaf, which is the first fruits of the barley harvest, before Yahweh, before Yah, to be accepted on your behalf on the day after the Sabbath, after the normal weekly Sabbath contained right here in the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the day after the Sabbath, meaning the first day of the week. The priest shall wave the sheaf of the barley harvest, which is the first fruits. This first fruits offering is known as Yom HaTorah. Bikurim. Yom HaBikurim. Leviticus 23:12. And you shall offer on that day, the day after the weekly Sabbath, during the feast of unleavened bread, when you wave the sheaf of barley grain, a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to Yah. Okay, so that, again, we don't do that anymore. We don't do burnt offerings to the Father anymore because there's no temple. We're not in Israel. We're not in Jerusalem. There's no temple. There's no Levitical priest system in place anymore. So we don't do any of that. Okay, it's grain offering. I mean, there's people out there, and I'm not going to knock them, but and I've participated in this myself. They'll get some grass or whatever out of their yard, and they'll wave it before the Lord. Well, that's I did that because I didn't know any better, but it's just foolishness. Okay, so the grain offering, its grain offering, which is the barley harvest that was harvested and prepared the night before, shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine barley flour mixed with oil. That would be olive oil. An offering made by fire to Yah for a sweet aroma. And its drink offering shall be of wine, not grape juice, like I've heard some Christians tell me over time. Foolishness, folks. And its drink shall be of wine, not grape juice. 1/4 of a hin. Now, I don't know. I mean, one of my Bible versions around here would tell me how much a hin is. And an ephah. Uh, but excuse me, folks, it's barley flour. That's why the night after but in the twilight, between sunset and total darkness, after the weekly Sabbath had come to a close, the barley was harvested, and then the majority of it was roasted and then ground up, had a stick, like they grind today in third world countries. They grind up that roasted barley, make it into a flour, barley flour, and then they would mix it with oil, olive oil, and then they'd offer it as a burnt offering. So in summary, wow, we're getting to a summary here. Let's check this out. Not quite. Okay. So in summary, where was I at? Wow, I really lost. Oh, okay. I'm going over some information again. Okay, so where was I at? I said so in summary. Okay, we've already gone over that. Yom HaBikurim. Okay. So in summary, on Yom HaBikurim, the day of first fruits, which is the day after the weekly Sabbath during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, is the day that we are to start counting of the 7 Sabbaths. The day after the seventh Sabbath is the one-day feast of weeks, Shavuot, Pentecost. Okay, Leviticus 23:15. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath. Okay, we've read this, but let me read it again. From the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, which is the first fruits, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Verse 16, count 50 days to the day after the seventh Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering of the barley to Yah. Okay, again, 50th is Penteconta, where we get the word Pentecost from. Okay, folks, this is why using the word Sabbaths, plural, in Mark 16:9 is the correct way to read that passage. Yeshua rose on the first day of the seventh of the Sabbaths. Yeshua rose on the first of the Sabbaths, counting that gets us to the one-day feast of weeks, Shavuot, Pentecost. So Yeshua rose from the grave on the first of the Sabbaths, counting that gets us to the one-day feast. Now, looking at that, I don't know if I was correct when I said that. Yeshua definitely rose on the Sabbath, and he definitely rose on the weekly Sabbath within the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That is for sure. There is no doubt about that. Let me move on, because if I get too deep into this, I'll lose my momentum here. Okay. Let me show you another example of the counting of the Sabbaths that took place several decades later. Yeshua rose on the first of the Sabbaths, counting. Okay. I'm going to have to leave that alone. Okay. So let me give you another example of the counting. The reason I am so hesitant, and I don't want to get off deep into this, because that's a whole nother study. I'm going to leave that to another study. Yeshua rose on the first of the Sabbaths. Yeah, I'm going to leave that for another study. Okay, let me show you another example of this counting of the Sabbaths. Like I said, Yeshua definitely rose on the weekly Sabbath contained in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, let me show you another example of this counting of the Sabbaths that took place several decades later. Okay, this is in Acts chapter 20, verse 6. And this is talking about Paul. But we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and in 5 days joined them at Troas, where we stayed 7 days. Now, on the first of the week, okay, now again, the word week there is 4521, which is Sabbath. So this verse should read, now on the first of the Sabbaths, plural, because this is after the days of unleavened bread. So they're counting the Sabbaths, okay? They need to count 7 Sabbaths. And then the next day after the 7th Sabbath is the 50th day, the 1-day feast of weeks, the 1-day feast of Shavuot, the 1-day feast of the day of Pentecost, all the same feast. So Paul and his entourage, they are counting. They are in their counting of the Sabbaths. Because this is after the days of unleavened bread had come to a close. And so Paul and his entourage started out on a missionary journey after leaving Jerusalem, after the feast of unleavened bread, Passover unleavened bread was over. Then they departed Jerusalem on a missionary trip, and they're counting the Sabbaths until they need to be back in Jerusalem, because the feast of weeks, the feast of Shavuot, the day of Pentecost, that is a pilgrimage feast, okay? That is a pilgrimage feast, which means it was mandatory for these men to be back in Jerusalem. Now, on the first, of course, day is not in the Greek. Now, on the first of the Sabbaths, plural, when the disciples came together to break bread, that word bread is G740, which is artos, which is a raised loaf, which they could eat because it was after the days of unleavened bread. Okay, so this word week right here is 4521, which is right here, Sabbath. Okay. All right, so that is the other example that I wanted to show you of the counting of the Sabbaths. Okay. So, okay, folks, this has been my longest teaching to date, and me rambling like I do doesn't help anything. And I greatly appreciate you guys sticking with me to the end of it. This was not an easy one for me, I can tell you. This took a lot of study and a lot of reading for me. And as you could see, I'm still not finished with my study. Okay. So this was not an easy one, but I learned things right along with you in this study. Even more so because I had to search these things out. But I learned this stuff right along with you guys, okay? This was not an easy one to put together for me, I can tell you, and I definitely was learning some things myself as I was putting this word study together. The bottom line and the point of all this, what we've been taught in the past about John 16:9 being evidence that Messiah rose from the dead on Sunday morning, is simply a fabricated myth with a particular purpose in mind, which I was hopefully successful in busting today. Okay. So this, you know, Mark 16:9 is evidence that our Messiah rose from the grave on Sunday morning is nothing but a myth. It didn't happen. Okay, he rose on the Sabbath. And how lawless Christians can squeeze in 3 days and 3 nights between Good Friday and Easter Sunday morning is so bizarre to me. It is, I mean, you got to be Well, Greg, be nice now. Be nice. You used to be one of them, remember? Yes, I was, Father, and I appreciate you bringing me out of all that. Okay, folks. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Ministry contact. Yeah. Okay. That's all I have for you folks. So I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you sticking with me. I thought it was going to be a long one. It is kind of is an hour and 41 minutes. So, but I appreciate you guys who watch my videos. And as you can tell, I'm trying to, I explained to you at the beginning that when it comes to this tech stuff, man, I really, really struggle, but I'm trying to kind of spice up my videos by adding some music on the front end of it and all that. So I'm trying every time I'm trying to spice up these videos. But anyway, I wish I had more knowledge of computers and editing videos and all that, but I don't, and I struggle. But anyway, when it comes to uh, reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and trying to convey to you guys what I understand out of the scriptures, that is that is my forte. Okay, that is what the Father has called me to do in the late fall of my life. He has called me to do this. And I pray to the Father all the time for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to understand His Word and to help me to teach His Word. Okay? So I have that on my prayer list every time I pray. So I hope you guys are getting something out of my videos uh because I get something out of putting them together for you. Okay, so I love you. I appreciate you guys. And may the Father's shalom, His peace, and His blessings be on you and your family. Okay. And I love you, and I'll see you in Father willing. Father willing, I will see you in the next video. Okay. Shalom. Okay. Bye bye.